Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Here we are going to present our final project material. The title is The Case of Aphasia, a Psycholinguistic Profile. Before we are going to present our material, I want you to know about our group member. Our group member consists of Muhammad Zidan, me, Puan Hayati, Ahmad Fazalika and Febby Zuliana Putri. Before I'm going to explain about the case of Mr. C, I want you to know about the background of Mr. C. Mr. C is a 68 years old right-handed man who suffered a cerebrovascular accident or stroke 6 months ago. Brain imaging revealed damage in the left frontal lobe, particularly in the region of the frontal operculum, including broca's area. His primary symptoms are non-fluent speech and difficulty with grammar, but his comprehension is relatively preserved. On this slide, I introduce the case of Mr. C, who presents with an acquired language impairment following a stroke. Based on his overall language profile, his condition can be classified as non-fluent aphasia, taking into account both the neurological evidence and his observable language behavior. The most likely diagnosis is broadcast aphasia. This diagnosis is supported by lesion location, speech production, patterns, and relatively preserved comprehension, which are discussed further in the following slides. And before we're going to the next slide, the example of the speech production patterns that Mr. C produced is like this. The boy fall instead of the boys falling. The girl cookie, the mother was no water over a sing full danger. So the next slide is about the justification language profile on Mr. C. This slide explains why Broca's aphasia is the most appropriate diagnosis. Neuroimaging shows damage in the left frontal lobe, specifically the frontal operculum that includes Broca's area, which is known to support speech production and grammatical processing. Mr. Smith is slow, effortful, and non-fluent, consisting of short and fragmented utterances. Like I said before, he mainly uses content words and frequently omits function words and grammatical morphemes, resulting in agrammatic or telegraphic speech. Despite these expressive difficulties, his comprehension remains relatively preserved, with high accuracy for single words and simple sentence. These things we're going to explain by my friend Deep on the next slide. I mean, on the different section. So we'll move on slide 3. Uh, to further clarify the diagnosis, this slide contrasts Mr. C condition with Wernicke's aphasia. Wernicke aphasia is typically caused by damage to the left temporal lobe and is classified as a fluent aphasia. Patients often produce fluent but meaningless speech, including jargon or invented words, and they show severe comprehension deficits. In contrast, Mr. C lesion in the left frontal lobe, his speech is non-fluent and effortful, and his comprehension is relatively preserved. This contrasting pattern clearly supports a diagnosis of Broca's aphasia rather than Wernicke aphasia. On this slide, we can see the brain diagram with Broca's area highlighted in the left frontal lobe. This region is responsible for motor planning of speech and for organizing syntax during language production. When this area is damaged, the brain can no longer efficiently organize and execute speech, which results in non-fluent, effortful, and agrammatic output, as seen in Mr. C. This case clearly demonstrates localization because a specific language function, speech production, and grammar is linked to a specific brain region. It also illustrates lateralization, since Mr. C right-handed and therefore relies primarily on the left hemisphere for language. This explains why damage to the left hemisphere result in aphasia. Okay, thank you. The next material will be explained by Febby.
Alright, let's move to the section 2. In this section, we will discuss the nature of Mr. C's speech production deficit. Our analysis is based on psycholinguistic theory of speech production, particularly the stage from conceptualization to articulation, as discussed in chapter 8 to chapter 10. Impaired level of speech production. First, when we look at the stage of speech production, Mr. C appear able to form the intended message. This is shown by his use of contextually appropriate content words such as boy, girl, and mother. This suggests that the conceptualization stage is relatively intact. However, the main impairment occurs at the level of lemma selection, where grammatical information such as function word and tense shall be specified. In addition, morphophonological encoding is also impairing, resulting in missing grammatical morpheme. Articulation is affected as a secondary consequence of these planning difficulties rather than as a primary motor problem. Agrammatism and telegraphic speech. This impairment lead to agrammatism in Mr. speech. He frequently omits function, word, and grammatical morpheme, as seen in example like boy fall instead of the boy is fall. As a result, his speech takes the form of telegraphic speech, which consists of short reduced utterances that convey only essential information, such as sail, full, danger. This pattern is characteristic of non-fluent aphasia, especially Broca aphasia. And then non-fluent TOT and the Weaver plus model. Mr. C's speech is highlight non-fluence, marked by long pause and great effort. This can be explained using the concept of the tip of the tongue stage, where the speech has access to the meaning of a word but struggles to retrieve its full phonological form. The Weaver plus model of speech production. The Weaver plus model of speech production further helps explain these difficulties. According to this model, speech production process in stage damage affecting the transition from lemma selection to phonological encoding slowed down to the process, resulting in hesitant and fragmented speech. So, conclusion of the analysis of this selection are our production speech definite is measuring difficulty lies not in generating idea, but in transforming those ideas into grammatical structure and fluent speech. His production deficit is characterized by agrammatism, telegraphic speech, and non-fluence, which are consistent with impairments typically observed in Broca aphasia.
All right, thank you for the opportunity. Okay, after we talk about the speech production deficit, we will look at Mr. C's sentence comprehension abilities. especially the difference between his performance on simple and complex sentences. Mr. C understands words and simple sentences very well. However, when the grammar becomes more complex, his comprehension breakdowns. This suggests that his difficulty is not with vocabulary but with synthetic processing, the grammatical part of language understanding. And then in here, we can see Mr. Xu perform strongly on simple language tasks. He can easily understand single words and basic sentence structure. For example, a simple sentence like the apple is red is processed correctly without hesitation. This tells us that his basic language system, such as word recognition, meaning, access, and basic sentence structure, is functioning normally. He shows no difficulty with understanding everyday grammar. And then for the next slide, breakdown in the complex sentences. However, his performance changed when sentences involve embedded clauses. For example, in the case like sentence, the line that the bear is chasing is yellow. Mr. C often chooses the wrong animal. In this case, he tends to think that the lion is doing the chasing instead of the bear. This shows that when sentence structure becomes less linear and more grammatically demanding, his comprehension becomes unstable. For the next slide, reason behind the problem. There are three main reasons why this breakdown happens. First, Mr. C relies on a simple rule. He assumes that the first noun he hears is the actor, the one doing the action. This works for short, direct sentences but fail when grammar becomes more complex. Second, when this first case is incorrect, he cannot reanalyze or reorganize the sentence. Most people can hold information in working memory and mentally rebuild sentence structure, but Mr. C is unable to do this. So he stick to the wrong interpretation. Finally, this issue is linked to demand in the left frontal lobe, which supports grammar processing and working memory. Because this area is affected, the brain cannot manage the sentence rules or track embedded clauses, leading to comprehension error. The next presentation will be explained by my friend.
Okay, now we move on to section 4, proposed therapy and theoretical implication. The first one is therapy goal and rationale. For the therapy component, the primary goal for Mr. C is to improve his grammatical production. Based on the case data, his most noticeable difficulty is non-fluent grammatic speech, where he mainly produces content words and omits grammatical elements such as articles and verb inflection. Although Mr. C does have some difficulty with complex sentence comprehension, his understanding of single words and simple sentences is relatively intact. Because of this, focusing therapy on grammatical production is likely to have the greatest impact on his everyday communication. In other words, improving how he expresses a sentence is more urgent than improving what he understands. The next slide is therapy approach. To address these production difficulties, therapy should target the use of function words and grammatical morphemes, particularly verb tense and agreement. The goal is to help Mr. C move away from telegraphic speech and toward producing complete sentence structures. Several therapy techniques can be used. Sentence completion tasks encourage him to supply missing grammatical elements. Picture-based sentence construction provides visual support, making it easier to form full sentences. Repetition with expansion allows the clinician to model a correct sentence and gradually reduce support. Writing-based activities can also reinforce grammatical structure. especially since Mr. C's writing shows similar grammatic patterns. And therapy can gradually introduce comprehension tasks involving complex syntax, such as embedded clause, but this should be done in a controlled and scaffolded way to avoid overwhelming his processing abilities. And the last one is theoretical model and implication. To explain Mr. C's language profile from a theoretical perspective, I used the Weaver++ model of speech production. This model proposed that speech production occurs in several distinct stages, including conceptualization, lemma selection, morphosyntactic encoding, and articulation. Mr. C preserved word-level comprehension and appropriate use of content words suggests that his conceptual and lexical semantic processing are intact. However, his frequent omission of grammatical morphemes and reliance on telegraphic speech indicate a breakdown at the morphosyntactic encoding stage. This dissociation provides real-world clinical evidence supporting the Weaver++ model's claim that grammatical encoding is a separate and vulnerable component of speech production. Overall, Mr. C's case demonstrates how psycholinguistic models can directly inform both diagnosis and therapy.